가까이 오지 마세요.
Today I'm going to be making Tsuyu's Feel Special dress. This is the basic sketch I made for the dress, and this is how you can make the pattern yourself. First step first, you're going to need a mannequin or yourself, a whole bunch of parcel tape and some cling film. It's also pretty useful to have a pen. You're going to cover yourself in cling film, cover yourself in parcel tape, and then draw the shape onto your body. As you can see, apparently I found this task very difficult. This technique gives you a very form-fitting kind of body piece. And once you've drawn on your pattern, just cut everything out. If you're wondering, I just did the bodice piece because I do know what a skirt pattern looks like, but I'll show you one later. Once you've got your parcel tape pattern, just lay it out on some fabric, trace around it and add a 1 cm seam allowance. If you're worried if your pattern's going to fit or not, you can always add a little bit more to the seam allowance. Also, totally don't worry about what fabric you're using. I'm currently using an old bedsheet that has lots of paint on it, so I apologise for that, it's gross. Now you can start sewing together your pattern pieces. Just start with the darts here, just sew along them and make sure you kind of add the seam allowance as you get to the end of the fabric. I'll show you here. Basically, make sure you taper towards the edge of it so that you don't get little holes in it like this, where it looks like a tiny mouth. Once you've sewn all 4 darts, just sew together the side pieces. This should mean you end up with a kind of long, curvy pattern piece. Once you've sewn together the whole top, you've got kind of an area of the chest which is slightly poking out thanks to the darts. For the skirt, you'll want to cut out 6 pieces. 4 that look like a flat skirt and 2 that look like the very top of the front skirt. I didn't film it because I'm great at this, but you'll just want to sew together all of the panels together and then sew just the back panels to the back part of the top. Now you just try on the skirt to make sure it fits. Hopefully it does. Mine did. This could be totally stress relieving or stress making, but now you just take apart everything you've just worked towards and now you've got your pattern pieces. Now's a good time to check if your fabric is going to be the right size, and then you can order it depending on how much you need. Since my fabric was quite wide, I ended up only needing 1 meter plus a zip and thread. If you can find one, now would be a great time to buy a buckle, but I couldn't find one, so I had to make one. You'll need a weird loopy thing, a couple of pieces of copper wire and some beads that you like the look of. After I finished making the dress, I realised it's actually not that important to have the belt buckle kind of thing on it. It doesn't actually need to close, you just need a buckle. So feel free to completely skip this step. If you really want to do this, you just bend a piece of metal so that it fits onto the little slidey thing but doesn't fall off. This beautiful demonstration will show you what I mean. Regardless of whether you skip that step, you'll need to glue on the main bit so that it actually becomes a buckle rather than just a weird loopy thing. Now for some ASMR. Basically just spray paint it, I guess. Right then, well, after that you just want to glue all the beads on with some random all-purpose glue you found in your house. It is 2 weeks later and your fabric has finally arrived. Now you've got your fabric, it's time to wash it so that it doesn't shrink once you've actually made your dress. Apparently this is a real thing that happens. I've never experienced it. I only just started washing the fabric because I was told to do it. You might notice now your fabric's really fraying, but just ignore that and pretend it never happened. It's fine, it's fine, it's fine. Now just pin down and cut out your fabric and make sure you cut out 2 of everything for the top. Also cut your front panel on the fold so you don't have a seam line down the front. Oh, and don't forget the strips for the straps. Sewing this dress together is pretty similar to sewing the pattern, except there's an extra step every so often. Starting with the straps. If you're trying to add a little buckle hole like I did, you're going to need to do some extra steps, but feel free to ignore this if you don't want to. Basically just follow what I did in the video. It's very hard to explain. It's just sewing together all of the raw edges so that you don't actually have any like holes that are just fraying. Once you're finished, you should end up with something like this, but remember this is actually kind of a useless step and I found I didn't need to do this. If you're doing normal straps, just fold them in half, sew along the very end and then the very long part until you get a long strip and turn it inside out, and then you have a strap. You'll also need to do this for the small one. Now, exactly the same as the pattern, you'll just sew the darts together, but make sure you go over the darts a couple of times so that they don't split, like mine did later on in the project. Ha 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 ha! Exactly the same as the pattern, just sew the sides together, and you should end up with something like this. Remember, you should have 2 of these, so now we're going to the next step, which is sewing the top of them together. Now you want to start using pins, because you remember that's actually quite useful. When sewing this together, remember to add the straps, because I forgot to, and I had to unpick the whole thing, so please don't do that. Oh, and I probably should have mentioned this, but there should be right sides together, so you have all the frayy bits on the outside currently. And yes, frayy is a word. I got accepted into a university to do costume design. I'm allowed to make my own words up now. This is the point in the video where I should probably be saying something useful, but I can't think of anything, and frankly I had to unpick this 5 times, so I think you can make some mistakes too. Now you've finally finished sewing that, you're going to want to sew just the centre part of the bottom of the top together, not the back part, just the front. It's currently going to look really weird and you're going to think I need to sew that together, but it's really important you don't, because that's where you put the back of the skirt so that you don't have any raw edges later on. As I am demonstrating beautifully right here, you might want to make some adjustments on the straps so that they sit flat on your chest. Now I'm going to show you the most important part of the dress, which is the ruching on the skirt, which gives it this kind of shape and this weird kind of tubing effect. This is entirely optional, but you can use bias binding like I have so that you don't have any raw edges that are sticking out and start to fray. You're going to want to start by hemming all of the bottom. I did a rolled hem because it would keep all of the fraying inside of the skirt. Once you've done this, sew together all of the sides except the back. You want to leave around a 2 cm seam allowance, so that later on you can make tubes out of these sections. You might want to add more if you don't have any bias binding, so then you can fold over the edges like a rolled hem, so that you don't have any fraying edges. This is optional, but you can press it with an iron at this stage so that the seam is more flat and easier to sew. Now you want to pin on all of your bias binding along the raw edge, and then sew it to the main skirt so that you get a sort of tunnel. Tunnel is not the best word for it, but I can't think of anything else. Just make sure when you're doing this step, you're keeping the fabric on both sides flat, rather than making a giant cavern instead of a little tunnel. I completely forgot to mention this earlier, but when you're sewing these seams, you need to make sure that you leave a little bit at the bottom so you can have the split. I'd like to apologise for the long silences during this, but there's a lot of videos of me sewing in this, and I forgot to film half of it. Once you've sewed together all those little tunnels, you'll want to create a little minecart to go through them. In this case, it's actually just a piece of fabric. Just get a piece of fabric that's twice as wide plus 2 cm of the width you want it to be, plus the length of your skirt. Then sew it exactly the same as how you'd do the straps. Once you've got your little fabric minecart, ram a crochet hook up it and try to fold it inside out. If you have an actual, I don't know what they're called, but they're little sticks with holes in them, they're kind of like giant needles. Use that, but a crochet hook works too. Then ram your minecart down the tunnel. I'm very sorry for these analogies, I've been playing a lot of Minecraft and I don't know what's happened. Make sure the frayed end of your minecart is at the top of the tunnel so that you can sew it on later. Just like this. Also make sure that you safety pin the end of your minecart, I don't know what to call it other than a minecart help, so that you don't lose it down the hole. The next step is slightly unrelated to ruching, but make sure that you actually do a rolled hem on the end of the little flap inside your front skirt so that it doesn't fray. This would also be prime time to do the very top of the skirt with perhaps bias binding, but I didn't do that and frankly it doesn't need to be done because it's on the inside of the skirt. I am far from a professional and frankly not looking to sell this skirt, so it doesn't really matter. This is perhaps the trickiest part, where you need to wedge all of that fabric inside the middle of the top and sew those bits together. Since you've already sewn the top of the top and the middle part at the bottom, you don't need to sew those again, but you will need to sew the back skirt panels to the back top panels. Now you're going to want to sew an invisible zip. I cannot explain this to save my life, so you're really just going to have to look it up on YouTube. But make sure that you don't sew it properly the first time because it might not fit and you might need to make some adjustments just like I did. You'll also need to sew the bottom together. I didn't film this and I actually can't remember how I did this, so Once you've got that zip in, now is time to try it on. Here's some beautiful footage of me trying on and realising it made my butt look really weird. It just had a lot of stuff in the butt, like fabric. Butt fabric, yes. This is easily fixable by just taking out some of that butt fabric, which I did. Once I was happy with how it fit, I cut off all the excess fabric so that we only had about 1.5 centimeters left. Now I went back to my trusty bias binding. You can skip this if you want, you just have raw edges on the inside, but basically just sew along it so that you keep all the raw edges inside the bias binding. I apologise for butchering Weki Mickey's song there. You should be finished now, but I did a photo shoot because I thought it would look cute and I wanted to put it on my website. The guide to this photo shoot is find every single plant in your house, get some LED lights, also that chair that no one sits in your living room. Perfect. I made everyone in my house leave the living room so I could do this in complete aloneness because I really didn't want anyone to see this, so please appreciate these modelling shots. I know they're terrible. I love them. What a cutie. Anyway, this is nearing the end of the video, so I should probably say thank you for watching and thank you for sticking around, and if you tried this, please tell me. It would be nice to know if anyone else failed 5 times making this. Here's the snazziest shot that I will be putting on my Insta. Thank you a gajillion times for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. I'm gonna go eat some food now. Thank you! Also, I'm so terribly sorry about my mic problems. I don't know what's going wrong.